Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Westminster Faith interview. My name's Linda Woodhead. I'm Professor of Religion and Society at Lancaster University. Why are we here? Well, we're here to listen to Delia and Alastair. How did it come about? It came about because Charles Clarke, who is visiting professor at Lancaster University with me, Charles and I decided earlier this year that we wanted to get really good research about religion into public discussion, into public debate, and raise the whole level of understanding and discussion about religion and society today. So we organised a series of debates called the Westminster Faith Debates on the place of religion in public life. And then we decided to have just these 3 interviews, this is the last one, to follow up in a bit more depth with 3 public figures very well known in our national life, in various areas of national life, to get them to talk about their own faith and how difficult or not it has been to express that publicly. Some nuts and bolts about how we're going to do this. Alastair is interviewing Delia, and that's going to take the first half of the time we have together, the first 3/4 of an hour. And then we're going to throw it open to you, and please ask any questions you like. We'll have open discussion from that point. It will be videoed, it will be podcast, it'll all be on our website, but you will be immortalised if you ask a question. You should know that if you don't want to do that. If you want to tweet about this, the hashtag is WFI, Westminster Faith Interviews 12, WFI12. Any more nuts and bolts that I've forgotten?
No.
Okay. When you ask a question, can you please say your name as well? That helps us for the editing and for the podcasts. Well, we've obviously, it's no surprise why we've asked the people we have here to come and talk about their faith. Delia, you will know, all of you, for her cookery. Some of you will know her for the football. Some of you may not know that she is also someone who has written a number of books, devotional books, about her faith. She's going to write more books about her faith, more books to come. So she was someone we very, very much wanted to talk to us about this topic. I'm going to make an apology now because I've got to run off at the very, very end of the debate. So I would have given you your presents at the end, but I'm going to give you your presents now.
Presents! Woo!
We all come down from Lancashire to do this. There's a whole team of us, and thank you to all the students and everyone who helps me on the team to come down. So we've got you some Lancashire presents, Delia. We've got you Lancashire cheese of 2 sorts.
Oh, wow.
It's kind of good and evil. There's the
Lancashire
bomb.
I love the good.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, this has got the Lamb of God on it.
I see. It's a holy cheese.
It's holy cheese. We've got damson cheese.
Wow, I know what that's like. Wonderful.
We've got some sloe gin.
I can't have that because it's the Preston North End badge.
Gosh.
And I don't like Preston.
No. Thank you.
And Alastair, we wondered what to get you. There's actually the fashion in Lancaster at the moment, really quite big on the stalls in Lancaster is...
Thank you very
so
much.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you for taking part.
There you go.
Charles has very kindly offered to come up and help me chair this. I have a kind of condition that I should declare at the outset, which is that when anyone mentions football, I fall into this kind of long sleep. So Charles is going to help out if that happens. And Charles is also going to introduce Alastair for us.
There is one thanks I should give, which I forgot to remind you of, which is to the Arts and Humanities and Economic and Social Research Council, who have funded the Religion and Society programme, a 5-year, £12 million programme, which Linda directs. If you look at the website, you just type in religion and society, you'll see the extensive work that's been done in exploring the role of religion in society.
And Charles, can I just butt in because we also need to thank Lancaster University, and Tony McHenry, who helps fund us, is here as well.
Thank you, Tony. My role is to introduce Alastair, the man who needs no introduction, as the T-shirt just illustrates. I've known Alastair for many years when he was firstly a campaigning journalist rather than a handler of the media for the Daily Mirror and other newspapers. And we had many arguments and interesting discussions at that time about how things should be addressed. I then knew him as when he worked for Tony Blair at number 10 Downing Street. My most famous moment with him, as he was a spin doctor par excellence, was when I was Minister of Police in 1999, and at Christmas he was rather short of news stories, and he thought we need to get news stories out, so he asked me to wear a horizontally striped T-shirt with a bag over my shoulder, with swag on the side, because he thought it would be a good photo call for the Minister of Police to be taken in that picture. I was one of the few who said no, and he now says it was a joke.
Joking, cracking up.
He was cracking up, yeah. Joking aside, Alastair's a tremendous man. He gets described, maligned, I would say, often in the media, and it's a great privilege, Alastair, that you have agreed to be here this evening. You're famous for your remark, "We don't do God." We particularly thought you'd be appropriate to interview Delia because of your joint love of football. We've often met together at Carrow Road, and your support for some obscure reason, Burnley Football Club, probably you've noticed is not in the Premiership like Norwich at the moment. But
we are in a more godly league.
Godly league, yes, indeed. I genuinely am grateful for you doing it. I'm now going to hand over to you to begin the evening talking to Delia.
All right, Delia, you ready?
Yep. Bring it on.
Okay. Well, I do know you through football and journalism.
Yes.
Really, which are not the two most godly parts of our national life. But when Charles asked me to do this, and I went off and did a bit of research, I was amazed. I thought I knew you really well, and I knew that you were somebody of faith, but I was genuinely amazed when I went off and found these books and read them and learnt how fundamental your faith would seem to be in a way that I was sort of shocked, to be honest.
Right.
So given that I was shocked by what I would call the scale and the scope of the relationship with God as you defined it, I want to start by asking you to define your relationship with God.
Well, I think the whole thing is about belief. And I believe in God. I believe that God is the creator of everything, of the universe, and science is telling us now there's a multiverse, we're going even further. And in this work of creation, I'm bowled over by that, for a start. And secondly, the thing that I suppose moves me the most now is the phenomenon of human life. And I feel that I cannot understand how anyone, if they really contemplate the phenomenon of all creation, and particularly human life, cannot think there's a creator. Because I'm sorry, I cannot believe in this accidental kind of molecular activity that ends up, being a human person. And it's all an accident, and, life's a bitch and then you die, as somebody said. No, I can't. So therefore I believe in a creator God. I believe in the phenomenon of human life, and I think that human life is elevated to being co-creator with God.
But so you were born and raised in this country, in this culture, in this religion.
No, I wasn't born and raised with any religion.
Okay, when I mean our culture, but if culture. Let's just say that you'd been, your parents hadn't been your parents, but they'd been a Saudi prince and a Saudi princess, and you'd been born there and raised in that culture. And you wouldn't be famous because nobody would be allowed to know what you looked like, and you wouldn't be on television, and you'd be a very different, you'd have a totally different sort of life, but you might be sitting there saying that you believe in God, but it's a totally different God and it's a totally different vision of God. So how are we who don't believe to sort of square all these, I find, impossible circles? And are you righter than they are? More right?
No, but I believe that in a personal God. So I believe collectively in having a relationship with God, but I believe there's a deeply personal relationship. And I don't think this can, I don't think this can be communicated by another person. I think it's who you are. And if you'd like me to explain how I came to where I am, I can. But, you know, it's who you are, where you are, how you're brought up, and also your culture, as you say, your culture. But also, I really do believe that within every person there is, whether they adhere to it or not, admit it or not, within every person there is this, the church calls it the seed of eternity, but I like to call it like a little smouldering fire that is sort of there, and sometimes a match goes to it and it lights up, but it's there in everybody. And that's why I can sit on a platform like this, because I know, and I do know, that deep down in everybody there is this capacity for God.
Why have you got it and I haven't?
Right. Do you want me to tell you how I got my faith?
Mm-hmm.
By accident.
Okay.
Totally and utterly by accident. When I was young, about 5 years old, my parents didn't have any religion, so they didn't go to church. But the one thing that happened to me at 5 years old was my mother put me to bed too early. I know she put me to bed too early because I could hear all the kids playing outside and there was I stuck in bed. But when she put me to bed, she gave me a picture, and it was an old-fashioned Victorian picture of Jesus with children all around him and in all different colours and different nationalities. And she just said to me, you know, Jesus looks after children, and, you know, you pray to him, and she taught me how to say Our Father. So there am I, in bed, broad daylight, not being able to sleep, and there was this picture, and I sort of thought about it, and I thought about it more and more, and it just happened that every night when I went to bed, there was this time of stillness and silence and reflection. Mm-hmm. Now, reflection is a very, very important word. And I think that reflection is something that we don't think enough about, and that we've got all the scientists now telling us, you know, about evolution, which I think evolution is why I've changed, you know, a lot from when I wrote those books. Evolution is the most powerful way of learning about God. And so when we suddenly became human, you know, we'd evolved all the way through over these millions of years, and then we're human. Human life begins. But human life has a consciousness and a brain, and begins to think, and has intelligence, and has the capacity to reflect. And I think, if I can put it really simply now, if you go to the gym and you exercise, you get strong muscles. If you don't do any exercise, you get flabby and boring, you become a couch potato. Now, with reflection, if you have space and time to develop your reflective powers, which we all have, then you get in touch with deep. If we're talking about God, we have to talk about deep. We have surface life and we have deep life. So once reflection develops within the human family, and we can understand and go deep, so there's this part of our lives, the deep part, the real me, the person, it's there that I, if you like, begin to understand God.
But I feel I go deep, and I reflect, but I don't have your faith.
Well,
why is my deepness any less significant than yours?
Well, maybe because you don't want it and are not pursuing it. I mean, if you want to know, I had a friend who was an Egyptologist, and he spent all day and all night reading books about Egypt, travelled to Egypt. There isn't anything he didn't know about Egyptology. Me? I'm interested in religion, I'm interested in God, so therefore I spend my whole time looking for it, searching for it. You know, in the scriptures it says the wise men came from the east and they searched diligently. Well, that's me. I have searched diligently. And
you've found. Does that mean there was a time when you didn't have it?
Yeah, but I don't think I've found. I think.
Or is it you're constantly looking? That's what I was interested in your book.
I am constantly looking, but if it really gets down to the person, you get what you want. Do you want to know? Do you want to seek? I think people should find out, seek, then say no if they want to. But to just wait for it to arrive, is not the way.
But I'm interested in God.
Great.
Right, but I'm interested in God from an intellectual point of view. And I'm interested in the fact that somebody like you, with whom I feel I have a lot in common in lots of different other ways, but on this, you probably can't quite see why I can't see it, and I can't really see why you see it.
No, I can understand why you can't see it.
Right.
I do understand that, but because I think sometimes it's not communicated well.
By whom? I love the bit in the book where you say that God talks through sources close to.
Well,
what does that mean?
I think what happens in a deeply reflective life is that a little light goes on. I've never had a religious experience, never, right? But a little light goes on, and you see in life, things resonate in everyday life, in people. And I'm just taken up now with the whole kind of the evolutionary process and how exciting it all is that the human race is moving forward and all the time progressing. And
but is God guiding that?
No, I think yes and no. I think we are co-creators. We are co-creators with God. So if I can be really simplistic, I can say, well, God says, right, there you go, human family, off you go. I'm here with you to help you, but you go and conquer that universe. You go and do it.
Why? But if he's so powerful, why can't he do it? What's the being a co-creator sounds a bit blasphemous to me.
Okay, well, let's try another way then. We'll go another way. Okay. We'll go another way.
All right.
You're a father.
Yeah.
And you've got a beloved child. And that child has to have a mind of its own and a will of its own. Mm-hmm. And as a loving father, which I know you are, you want that child to have everything to succeed. But you can't go and do it for them. They've got to do it. You're there to love and support and help them, but you want them, first of all, to stand up and walk, and then
I get that.
To move on.
When you talk about prayer, this is the other thing I thought was really interesting. You see prayer, I know the books were written a long time ago, so you may have changed, but my sense is you see prayer not as an act, but as a process, a never-ending process, and almost like a state of mind. Is that right?
Well, where I've moved on now is I don't like the word prayer.
Okay.
Because I think it's confusing, and I think people get very confused and think they can't pray. But I just think if you want to know God, if you want to have a sense of God, then I think you need to have reflective time in your life, and I think you then have to be just open to it and watch this little light going on. And it's not in, religious things. It's in life. It's every day.
So are you praying now?
I don't ever use the word, but what I do is every day in my life, I have stillness and silence every day.
Right, and how do you do that?
Right. I have half an hour in the morning and half an hour in the evening.
Where do you go? What do you do?
Well, I'm very lucky because I have something called a writer's treehouse at the bottom of the garden, and I can go there. But I mean, it's possible anywhere, wherever there's a bedroom or anything. Now, I don't know how to pray. I haven't got a clue.
So what do you do?
The onus is not on me. But what I do is I just sit down. I have stillness and silence in my life. My mind is full of all kinds of distractions, whatever it is, but it doesn't matter. If you think of a young couple, think of a man and he wants to get to know a girl, there's no way he can get to know her if he doesn't spend time with her. And I just find this silent time, it's receptivity.
But are you spending time with yourself or with God?
Well, I believe that God is present in every human person.
And are you talking? I mean,
no, there's no talking and no conversation.
Do you see somebody? Or
no,
something?
nothing. It's
do you
just
hear
a
anything?
real. No, it's really boring. It's very boring.
So it could be like.
Yeah.
Meditation.
No, none of those
yoga.
They're too grandiose. No.
Okay.
I'm not clever enough.
So you're just being on your own.
I'm just being in stillness and silence, developing my powers of reflection, and that will not be nothing will happen in that half an hour, but then bang, something will happen on the radio, in the television, out in life, and you recognize this wonderful thing called human life.
What about when it's bad things on the television and bad things on the radio? Where does that fit in?
Well, it fits in the fact that we are in a process. I like this word, this way of describing it. We are in the process of becoming, right? What they say in football is we're a work in progress.
Moving to the next level.
Moving to the next level. But I think we are in a process of becoming. And I suppose I have to tell you that when I became a Catholic in the 60s...
Just on that, why did you do that?
Oh. Why did I become Catholic?
Yeah.
Well, you see,
to something like me, I talked to Tony Blair at length about this, and it seemed to me that the only thing that was sort of different was something to do with what you thought of the blood. I couldn't quite work it out.
No, okay, we'll have a go. Let's have a go.
Tell me why you went from one to the other.
We'll have a go. Okay, so going back to the 5-year-olds, what it did for me, that time, that empty space time, when I was thinking perhaps about God and, maybe speaking to God and saying, God bless everybody and all of this kind of thing happens. And then suddenly you feel you actually do know who he is. And so when I got to school, we had scripture lessons. Oh, ducks of water. And I was terrible at school. But I loved scripture, and when there was any carol service or anything like an Easter service, in my school I was a disaster. But when it came to reading the scriptures, they always asked me, because I would get up and read them with passion and with understanding, because I began to understand. And so there was a kind of, I believed in God, and I felt I knew God. And I could recognize God in certain things going on. But I never had a faith, I never had a religion. I went to a Methodist Sunday school, I became a Congregationalist brownie. I went to a Church of England youth group, and then at the age of about 22, I met a Catholic. And this Catholic was sort of always went to Mass. So one day I said, can I come to Mass? It was all in Latin, mumbo jumbo. Didn't understand a word. But because I knew God, that's authentic. I knew that all that mumbo jumbo that was going on that altar was authentic. I don't know how I knew, because I knew who God was.
But is that a different God to the one that you had before?
No, but I do think it was like a duck to water, and I was thirsty and going and having instruction, and somebody talking to me about scriptures and about, you know, that learning about it was a joy and wonderful. And
but given that the scriptures ultimately they are words and they are stories,
yeah.
And as Charles and I know, you can do all sorts of things with words, and not least interpretation.
Yes.
So your interpretation of those words
yes.
can be very different according to which faith you pursue.
Yeah, but if we talk about, it's nothing to do with which faith we pursue. The Bible gets a lot of bashing. You know, the Bible, the Bible, the Bible. But all the Bible is it's a collection of writings about, guess what, human life.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore, that's how I see it. It's human life, and it's lives lived. And if you're interested in the subject, then you're interested in what those lives lived and those writers had to say. And when I went to Israel, I went to something called the Museum of the Rock, and I saw a facsimile of Isaiah in a case, like a showcase. The scroll was in this big, great, and I'm looking at Isaiah. I don't know, it's only a facsimile, but he's writing like I write, like in the margin, arrows, this is crossed out. That, whoever wrote Isaiah, wow. It's all we're doing is reading accounts of human life and what human life discovered.
What about, take a fairly topical aspect of modern human life, which is the relationship between and the claiming of faith in the acts of killing and of terror. Mm-hmm. Now, what does your God make of all that? The guy who's flying the plane into the Twin Towers, one of his last thoughts is that he's doing it for God. Mm-hmm. And when he dies, he's going to go off to heaven, and the Vestal Virgins are all going to wait for him, and that's making him feel really good about it. And I can't get my head around that either.
No, I can't either, but I do think this whole evolutionary process is we are evolving, and on the way we are striving, we are making mistakes, people are getting the wrong end of the stick, but I think it is a process of evolution, and I think that
where does it end?
It ends in human beings, individual human beings, becoming one and being united with God. I think we're evolving towards love, and at the moment we're not perhaps very near it, but that's...
But is that a way of just keeping the world going forever, in that we're never ever going to get to that position?
No, because I think we will.
Do you?
Because, and here we have to go now to the trickiest bit of all. We'll go to the trickiest bit of all now.
Go on.
And that is the Creator God who created the universe, all of life and human life, is involved in that human life like a father is involved in a son. But we're told to say Father, our Father. Human life is so important and so precious that this God of ours took on becoming human to experience what we experience and to join us in our journey.
So all that is just part of a journey?
Yes.
So when you do come out of your half hour at the bottom of the garden and you turn on the telly or the radio and it is all bad news...
It's horrible, I don't want to see it.
Right, but it is part of the journey.
I'm a coward and I don't want to see it, but it's part of the pain of entering our destiny. Part of the pain of it is suffering.
Okay. I'll buy that.
Okay, because, the way they say it in the Bible is quite a good way. The labourer in the vineyard, is suffering in the hot sun, labouring away. And then at the end of it, there's this beautiful wine in the bottle. Mm. And I think we're nowhere near it, but we're getting there. and hope is a very important thing.
You said in this one, I know you wrote it a long time ago, and you wince every time I raise it, journey into God. But you said in there that the sole purpose of our existence is union with God.
Yes. Union with each other and union with God.
Right.
But
well, can you have one without the other? I can sign up to the first bit. But does that mean if I can't do that, if I can't have that union with God, I can do the union, but if I decide I can't, for whatever
that's
reason,
your choice.
Right.
I mean,
but does that mean that
if you choose not to choose, then that's your choice.
Right, but does that mean that I'm worthless because there's then no point to my existence?
No, because unity, complete unity between all that exists is complete unity. So though I believe in everyone is completely individual, mm-hmm. I believe that we're all one, so that we'll go to our destiny as one. Mm-hmm. And we'll say, come on, Alastair, you're one with us now, so I'm afraid you're here.
But you're sort of dragging me along. I haven't made that.
No, you're not. We're not dragging you along, because you will. It'll be all right.
And I'm not.
Be all right on the night.
I'm not one of these militant atheists.
No, I know.
I don't like all that.
No, I know you don't, and you're very understanding. You're very understanding. But perhaps I better tell you one of the most significant things that happened to me is in the 60s, when I became a Catholic, which is when we started to talk about why I became Catholic. In the 60s, when I became a Catholic, there were books on sale by a priest scientist called Teilhard de Chardin. And he was a paleontologist, a geologist, and a very, very accomplished scientist. And he started something which I think now is the future, and that is the convergence of science and religion. Mm-hmm. And I think that the scientists are going, well, he says it like this. Believers are going, we believe in God, we're up there. Then the humanists and the naturalists are going that way, and the science, but they've got to kind of merge and get to there. So instead of being up there or there, it's got to be there.
But there are scientists.
It's happening. That's why it's so exciting now.
But there have always been scientists who have got a deep faith.
Yes, but when you begin to see what he was saying that, we will converge, we will be one.
Yeah.
And that was like, he was a priest in the First World War, and he chose not to be a sort of a padre, but to actually be a stretcher bearer. Mm-hmm. So he was a stretcher bearer in the First World War, and that's where everything came from that experience. And I think what he was saying, and now I just hope one publisher somewhere in the world will publish all these books again here now. In America, you can get them in America, and there are a lot of scientists now in America who are using what he wrote. But I'm just seeing it happen now. I mean, I read the books then, when I bought them in the 60s, but now I'm reading them now, and the whole computer thing, the web, I think it's happening. It's not about us. It's going to happen to us. It's happening to us. We are converging, and there are signs of it.
4 of the top 10 Facebook pages in the world are about Jesus. You know that?
I do know that, and I also read an article in the Times 3 Easters ago where it said art students keep painting pictures of crucifixes. Where does it come from? My favourite painter, a man called Craigie Aitchison, was an atheist like you, but he kept painting crucifixes. We sort of said to him, why? And he just said, I don't know, I just felt, he suffered so much, and it's just there in me, but he didn't believe. But there's no way, Christianity, no one's going to stamp that out. It just rolls on.
What, just as a couple of topical issues, where do you stand on issues like women bishops?
I knew this one was coming. Oh, well, unfortunately, churches are a little kind of, they drag their feet a bit, don't they? They're not a bit sort of, and obviously, you've got to have women priests. And if you've got women priests, then you've got to have women bishops. And I think that it's madness to insist, and the Catholic Church has never yet come up with anything that I've read that says why you can't.
Okay.
They say you can't, but they haven't said why you can't. Now, as an observer of religious things and religious people, and I go to Mass every day, and I think...
Go every day?
Yeah. And I think that I probably wouldn't have any priests. See, what I would have... I mean, this is me now. I know I'm going to get a letter from the bishop in the morning saying, don't appear in public anymore. You're banned. But I think that observing this over all these years and seeing people in church, you know, and there's priests are one-man bands, you know, or if they're married, that, you know, they're married. But either way, there's a problem. You know, if you're celibate, we all know the problems of being celibate, and the problems of being married. If you're married, you know, your duty in the middle of the night is to your 2-year-old with measles, not in the hospital giving the last rites. So that's a problem. And then you've got the celibate ones, you know, and they have all their problems. So what I would do is I would have shared ministry. So I would have somebody who maybe is ordained to say Mass and administer the sacraments. Mm-hmm. But alongside him, if you're good at preaching, you would be a preacher. Or her, yeah. If you're good at preaching, you'd be a preacher. If you're good at counselling, you'd be a counsellor. If you had time to visit the sick, you would visit the sick. If you're an accountant, you do the accounts. And if you're good at, I don't know, if you're a handyman, you can look after the building.
You're talking wholesale modernisation of the church.
I am, yeah. Well,
and how far are we down that evolutionary path?
I'm too old. I don't think. If I could have been Pope, it would have all been different.
Okay. Would you have liked to have been the Pope?
I'd like to be the Pope. I'd like to be the head of the FA, and I'd like to be.
So just power crazy like the rest of us.
I am.
Yeah. Okay.
Stop you now. This football's been mentioned.
All right.
We're going to have to throw it open in a minute. But Charles, did you want to jump in with anything before we throw it open?
The one thing I wanted to ask Delia is, Delia, through football and the rest of it, you've constantly talked about the society should give more importance to those kind of things, to allow the individual to come through. And could you just talk a little bit about that? And I know it's sports, Linda, but I think just a little bit about your beliefs and attitudes on that would be great.
Well, given that I believe the whole world is moving towards being more social and more, I think that my experience of football is, it gives you an experience of community like nothing else. I mean, I don't go to rugby, maybe it's the same in rugby, but the experience of community, I think human beings are at their very best when they're in community.
But didn't the church used to do that?
Yes, and it still does. It still does. But I've seen it in church, and I belong to a community. So if I go to, Michael will tell you, Istanbul, or if we go around Russia, we go around, we find Mass. So I'll find Mass all over the world, and I know that one of the things that is said in the words of the liturgy is, you know, from the rising of the sun to its setting, Mass is being celebrated all around the world every single day, all the time. That's community. So I can find my community in Germany, in Holland, in France, or in Dubai. I can find it in Dubai. But I think football is perhaps, you know, equal to that, because the same thing, if I travel around the world, all I've got to do is anywhere I go is find somebody who likes football, and I'm off, you know, and I've got companionship, and I've got, you know, it's a collective passion, and that's how we're made. We're made to have a collective passion, and we're meant to be together and support one another.
But I know people in the church who resent the fact that a lot of people see football almost like a religion. Well, I probably do, actually.
Well, I once had to give a talk in Norwich Cathedral, on the 100th anniversary of the existence of Norwich City Football Club. And I talked about the beauty of football, the beautiful game, and I said, you know, if football is of religion, so be it, you know, because my religion is involved in what happens in human life. And football happens in human life.
So maybe I've got a little bit of religion in
You have!
yeah.
Okay.
You have.
Okay, so over to you. And is it okay to ask Alastair questions as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. Who wants to go first?
Let's chat this together.
Just here, please. And the microphone's coming, and can you tell us who you are, please?
My name's Andy Coates. I just want to put a question to Alastair, but I'm sure Delia would her input into it would be very helpful. I wonder if Alastair would be more comfortable with all of this if the term God wasn't applied. The idea that that's littered with too many preconceptions, which come from other places which get in the way, and building on a tradition within Judaism within which the term Yahweh was applied instead of God, and actually a tradition within which Yahweh was breathed and not spoken as a term because it's too great a mystery to be articulated. And I wonder whether you'd be more comfortable with that as opposed to applying the God label.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's just see if there's anyone else who wants to come in.
Right at the back. Very, very back.
Yeah, very back. Thanks. And then
Blessed good evening to you all. I'm Eliza Ives. I'd like to address Alastair first and then Delia, if I may. I won't take long this time. Alastair, duet mondroit. What does that say to you in, I think it's Latin?
What did you say?
Duet mondroit.
God
and right, okay.
God and right. And this is supposed to be the government, isn't it? The government's motto, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
And you say you don't believe in God?
Okay.
All right. Delia, may I say, it's over 30 years I wrote to you not knowing that I would get a reply, and it was a Christmas card. And to my surprise, Delia, you wrote me back with a beautiful Christmas card. And I say, I'll never meet her. And look, Alastair, it's a miracle we have met. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And was there one just here? Just take the microphone.
Thank you. Chris Rich. I'm a priest that is out of a job now, it would seem. Delia, do you think there's a difference between choosing faith and accepting faith?
Delia, do you want to kick off?
Yes. I think choosing it, you see, I got it by accident, so I don't actually have any experience of choosing it. But I think accepting it is probably very important. I think, you know, we're sort of... somebody once wrote, empty spaces that only God can fill. And I think acceptance and receptivity are very, very important. Does that answer it or not?
It does.
Take the... Blah, blah, blah.
It does. But you were saying to Alastair that his not having faith is a choice.
I think it probably is. I think I personally, if I hadn't come to it in the way I came to it, I think I'd want to be able to find out about it and really know about it before I could reject it. And really, the question I'd like to ask Alastair is the wonder of creation and the wonder of human life. Do you really think it was accidental? It's all just, you know,
no, but
hurtling towards nothing?
No, I don't. But I you see, I think that it's not that I've rejected it. In fact, Fiona, who's not here, Delia knows my other half, Fiona, and she's much more militant atheist than I am, in that she thinks actually that belief causes a lot of harm and a lot of division and so forth. As I've said to you before, I'm a pro-faith atheist. And I mean, I brought along this book for Delia today because there's a bit in there I've forgotten until somebody reminded me this morning, where I talk about this, what I think is a near religious experience.
Yes.
After a friend of mine died and all this nature stuff going on, and it's too complicated to explain now. But the point is that I can feel all that, and I do feel all that, but I can't make the intellect. I don't know if there's a choice or not, but I can't make that intellectual leap that says all of these things that I think and the life that I think people should lead and the values that they should hold, that I'm going to wrap them in something called God or anything else you might want to call it. And my point, I think it is, I mean, the great thing about the whole story, it is, I mean, I wasn't being glib when I said 4 of the top 10 Facebook pages in the world are to do with Jesus. I think 3 of them are Spanish. 2 are Spanish and 2 American, I think. It is probably the most told and retold story on the planet, in the history of the world. And it's a very, very powerful story. You're not going to change the name. It's just not going to happen. God is such a powerful thing. You have to have, I think you have to have priests, by the way. I'm rehiring this guy. I think you have to have priests, and I think you have to have words, and you have to know what those words, what you think those words mean. But I don't think you could have a sort of redefinition of
people
God,
don't just
Jesus.
use God now, but those words do change. So more people believe in spirit or life force or energy than use the word God. So it's not always fixed.
But I would say that, well, maybe they do, but I think they are not what I would. I think they are moving away from a set of beliefs then, or they're adapting a set of beliefs.
Can I just gloss on the third question, Alastair, which was to you, because we've got to ask you about doing God. I mean, if you think about the Labour government in your time, in some ways it was incredibly religious. It had the deep kind of Christian socialist belief. Mm-hmm. You remember Private Eye had the Vicar of St Albion, and that always seemed kind of right. There was that kind of sense about Tony Blair. And yet, it's only out of office that Tony Blair came out, Gordon Brown came out. You know, there was that keeping the lid on, not doing God. Mm-hmm. Why, and was it necessary?
Well, I'll tell you why. As to whether it was necessary, your judgment is as valid as mine on that. I mean, I'll tell you the history of the thing. I always knew, a bit like with Delia, I always knew that Tony Blair was somebody of faith. I didn't know until I got to know Tony really well just how big a part of his life it was. So, for example, you talk about having to find Mass in Russia, and we had to find a church everywhere we went, and it was a bloody nightmare because of, security and all the rest of it. But we did. That's part of what we had to do, as if we didn't have enough to get on with. And I always said to him that whereas in America, you can't really become president unless you're seen every Sunday, whatever you're doing in your private life, whatever you actually think, you've got to be wandering around every Sunday being seen clutching the Bible. It's a part of the political space. And if you don't fill that political space, there are political consequences. I always felt, rightly or wrongly, that a politician in our system who emphasized his or her religious faith was taking a political risk because they were laying themselves open to the accusation that they were aligning their politics with their faith. And the only time that Tony actually, how dare he, went against me, and he wrote on this issue, he wrote a piece for the Sunday Telegraph in, I can't remember when, 1995, 1996, and the headline, it was about What Easter Means to Me by Tony Blair, similar to one of your books here. And he wrote this piece, and it was a very interesting, very thoughtful, very personal, very compelling piece. And I said to him, well, do it if you really want to do it, but I'm telling you, the news on Sunday is going to lead with the Tories saying that you are claiming that to believe in God, you have to be Labour in our politics. And he said, well, I'm not saying that at all. I said, I know you're not saying that, but I promise you that's what is going to happen. And do you know who the two were who led the charge? Brian Mawhinney, brackets, God, and Anne Widdecombe, brackets, God. They're both big believers. But the politics of it were messy. Now, Tony accepted that thereafter. The reason... And
he accepted you were right.
He accepted I was right. Yes, you're absolutely right, Charles. Yes.
And you like that.
And frankly, you should have worn the swag. But the other thing is, I must tell you about how the We Don't Do God thing came about, because it's the most ridiculous story. I mean, I promise you, including today, there is not a day I don't get emails and letters from people saying, I'm writing a thesis about this, that you said we don't do God, what was the strategic thinking behind this? I'll tell you exactly what happened. It was after 9/11, we were travelling all over the world. There was a guy from Vanity Fair called David Margolick, very well-known profile writer. He was writing a massive profile about Tony. And he was coming all over the world with us. He was on the plane, he was hanging around, and he kept saying to me, I just want 10, 15, 20 minutes with Tony Blair, just to sort of... And I kept promising him, yes, we'll do it, fobbing him off. We were on a flight to America. Eventually I said, right, come down to the plane, you've got 20 minutes, you can sit and have a cup of tea with him, talk about anything you want. And he was, like a lot of journalists do, I've done it, we've all done it. One more question. Prime Minister, that's a really interesting answer. Just one more question, if I may. We were on the 11th, one more question, when he said, finally, if I may, Prime Minister, my very, very, very final question. I'd like to ask you about your faith. And I stepped in, I said, I'm sorry, we don't do God. That was it. That was it. He wrote his profile, it was on page 23 of this 50-page Magnus. The Daily Telegraph picked it up, and they did a little piece, sort of down page 7 or something, Alastair Campbell on why Blair doesn't do God, and it just went whoosh. And it's, you know, but I still think, for a British politician, I think there's a danger. Just on Dieu et mon droit, can I answer Dieu et mon droit? Charles was a member of Parliament. What do they do every day at the start of Parliament? They say prayers, because the church is part of the state, whether we like it or not. So it's not that I didn't believe in what the government did, but I think it's possible to believe in what the government you're working for is doing without thinking that it's all about God and my right.
Can I just, I know there's a couple of people wanting to question, but I'd just like to follow up on that by asking a very interesting question to follow on what you just said, which is how easy is it to talk about your faith? One of the things we've found in these Westminster faith debates and so on is that many people somehow aren't ready or easy to talk about their faith. You had to decide this evening whether you'd be ready to come and talk about it, which you've done extremely openly. Have you done that throughout your life?
Yes.
Is it something, so you'd always be ready to talk about it?
My problem is somebody shutting me up.
Well, that's Linda's job.
But do you think that people of faith feel slightly beleaguered? I get that impression because of all the Dawkins stuff and John Humphreys and the kind of anti-Godism that's around the place.
Yes, I do, and that's why I would like to try and, I'm going to have a try at writing something else. But I am aware, Alastair, that I don't have your intellectual capacity, and I might not be able to write for you. But I can recommend someone else. I could give you a book written by Teilhard de Chardin, and he was an intellectual. See how you get on with that.
Okay.
Okay,
yeah,
let's take another round, please. One at the front here.
Thank you. I'm Peter Stevenson from the Elephant and Castle. As God has gifted you with a public realm, what's your responsibility as a follower to share that with the people you meet?
Just a moment. I'll take another one there, please.
Charles Cookery, the brother out of a crossing star. Actually, the word God, if I may say so, it was derived from the English word good. But what we should refer to is Father. When we mention Father, we're referring to the creator of heaven and earth, the one that superintends over everything. That's why we should call on our parents as father or mother. We have moms and dads. As for Mr. Campbell, I think in the length of time, he will embrace the faith wholeheartedly. It's just a matter of time. The Holy Spirit monitors everything. Thank you.
And over there, thank you.
Hi, Mark Chater. Could I thank you both for putting your beliefs out there for us. Can I just ask you about doing God in schools? You both just tell us a bit about your views on to what extent in this society we can and should speak about God in schools and ask questions about God in schools.
Well, as a 5-year-old convert, I really feel there should be instruction, and I think that children should be brought up to know what it's about. And I'm in favour of a multicultural society in the global village, and we have to learn about other faiths as well. But I do think it's very, very sad if there is no education at all, and that children, are surprised when they hear about what Christians believe. Or
I favour the teaching of religion in schools, and by that I mean all religions and all faiths. Just as I think that, we're all, and this is where I think we've got to decide. You see, in a sense, the political class in Britain sort of pays lip service to this. The lady's question about, Dieu est mon droit. Charles didn't ever stand up in the House of Commons and say, I'm not saying these silly prayers because I don't believe in God. You go along with it. But I think we all accept, for example, that when kids go to school, we teach them that sport is a good thing for them. I think we should teach them that politics is a good thing. And I think we should teach them that actually having an interest in faith is a good thing as well. So I don't like faith schools. I don't like the idea that there's only one religion that can get taught in a school. I think we should teach children about faith and religion because I think it's a really important part of the modern world. Not least it's an important part of global politics at the moment. I think I couldn't help looking at this bit, the gentleman who says that one day I'm going to find it, because there's a bit in this book where I spoke at a funeral, and the priest, the minister at the funeral said, poor Alastair doesn't do God. Poor Alastair. And then I write, Tony Blair was always convinced I would find God, but he was worried I'd become an Islamic fundamentalist. So
Your responsibility in the public realm, somebody else. If God's given you the role in the public realm.
Well, I didn't get a role in the public realm in religion, but I do believe in the whole everyone's vocation is to service, and I do feel that when I think of human life again, I am absolutely fascinated that no human person has the same face, and no human person has the same voice, and now we know that no human person has the same DNA. And I do believe that the embryo of love is empathy, and that people in their vocation, the vocation is to service, to serve the community. So thank God, there are dentists. I don't know how anyone could want to be a dentist, and I apologize to any dentists here. But thank God there are dentists, thank God there are train drivers, because we need everything. And I think after 2 world wars and industrial revolution, the people in this country certainly needed a bit of help with their cooking. And because, after 2 world wars and no handing down from mother to daughter, so I felt it was within my remit to have this vocation to try and serve in that way, to try and make it possible so that people can cook more easily. But I think everybody, whoever they are, whatever they do, is very special and very singular, and that the whole of humanity, from the time of the first man to the end, somehow or other needs that person. The singular is very special.
Is there faith in your cooking?
Well, I just think, I always used to say that I think God wants people to help people with their cooking. And yes, the celebration of life is the celebration of good food and good wine. It's all through the Bible, and it's all through, history that is all about, there is such enormous pleasure in eating.
Okay. Who was next? Yes, please, on the end there. And then the lady there in pink.
Hello, my name is Bashkim and I come from Albania. I've been here since 1999, and very often I hear people saying to me that they don't feel comfortable expressing their faith in this country as much as they would like to express it. And also, as we have recently and very often heard here in this country, that people like the one who was working at the British Airways that was told you either take the cross out or you'll be fired. I wanted to ask, do you think, talking about outside church, that people in this country are comfortable or are able to express their faith as much as they would like to?
Okay, thank you. And the lady here? Yes, that's you.
My name's Ela, and I'd like to put a question to Delia. You talk a lot about the Bible, and thank you for sharing your story and your journey in faith with us. But in choosing to be a Catholic, and in your journey through faith, have you looked at other religions, and what of some of these other religions that we learn and know about have you found resonance with as part of your journey in faith?
And just the lady in pink is, yeah.
Me?
You.
My name is Neela Devi, and this question is for Delia. Regarding faith, you talked about how Alastair must choose, but you also said that it just happened to you. I just want to ask you, is there a role for grace in this for you?
Yes, there is. And I find that a lot of the vocabulary of Christianity is difficult to deal with. I attempt to be a communicator myself, and I know the word grace is used, but it's somehow or other, it's a difficult word. And so I would like to translate grace and talk about enabling. I think union with God means that we are enabled. And so the word grace was that God is there, and like the song says, his amazing grace is coming into his people. But I like to think of it as being that he is a divine enabler, and he enables us to move forward.
Would you be able to bring that to Alastair, that he's going back to that metaphor about him being father and helping his child to learn this or understand that he could also receive grace to find faith?
Well, that's good, because my daughter's called Grace. So there's a neat fit here.
Yeah. But that's a very good point. That is a very good point.
Is he moving in mysterious ways as we speak?
Always.
The other faith.
There was a question I thought was a very interesting question about to what extent either of you had chosen or not chosen, as when you became a Catholic, for example, had you looked at other faiths, or in the case of Alastair, having come to your view as you have, to what extent have you looked at other possibilities and discarded them before being where you are?
Me? Well, I didn't really research other faiths. I had a friend who was an ex-Muslim who became a Catholic, and he introduced me to some Muslim literature, which was very good. But I feel an empathy towards other faiths and other beliefs, and a deep respect for them. And when I was in Dubai once, I went to Mass in the morning, very early. There are a lot of migrant workers in Dubai, and daily Mass is attended by about 300 or 400 of them. But I had to get up very early in the morning so that a Muslim taxi driver came to pick me up to take me to the church. And he had already been to his morning prayers, and he was very interested in that I was going for my morning prayers. And we just spent this half an hour from the hotel I was in to the city centre, and we spent half an hour. And I was so privileged to be talking to him about his belief, and he told me about Ramadan, and I have a great respect for it, and I think God is in everything and everywhere. But I do feel that the Christian faith is ticks all the boxes for me.
Well, I went to, growing up as a child, both my parents, my dad's from the Hebrides, my mother's from Ayrshire, and we went to church every Sunday, Presbyterian church, and so I was sort of raised as a Presbyterian. And I think one of the reasons that I started to reject it was because most of my upbringing, I lived in, the places I spent most time, Keighley where I was born, Burnley, and Leicester. We moved to Leicester when I was about 11. All towns of, really major racial mix change going on. And to go to school, I used to have to walk through this really Pakistani area of town. And I think in a funny sort of way, this is going to lead me to the Albanian gentleman, because I think they challenged it's back to the point I asked you earlier. I couldn't understand how I was meant to feel that this thing that I was doing every Sunday was absolutely the only way to be. And I could see every day when I went to school, there was this other very, very different.
Yeah.
And I really liked the people and used to talk to them about it and stuff like that. And I think, on your question, I think one of the reasons why people do feel a bit uncomfortable, Christians, is partly a kind of media thing, and it's just not sort of fashionable, not trendy, if you like. But also I do think actually that there's so much Islamophobia around the place that it's a response to that as much as anything. That actually... Yeah. Far more...
Discriminate.
Discriminating or against?
He's saying there's more discrimination against Christians in Britain than there
right, yeah. But I think what it is, the point I'm making is I think that there's a real strain, a lot of it media-driven, in fact I raised this point at the Leveson inquiry, of Islamophobia, and I think that is turning people against religion more generally. And that is why a lot of Christians feel reluctant to open up about being of strong faith.
And Leveson did pick up on that, actually.
He did.
Some of the projects on our programme analysed the way the media does treat Islam and gave evidence to Leveson, and he included that in that as a serious cause for concern. What's the answer, though, Alastair? How do you handle that?
Look, don't get me going about what's happened to the Leveson inquiry.
Just Islamophobia.
briefly and without swearing. I've always felt that there will not be a change in the British press until there is an honest debate within the British press about the British press. And we've seen in the last few days how utterly dishonest they are continuing to be about this debate. And so, the other thing, it's got next to no coverage at all, was the stuff about the way that Europe is covered in our press, the way that faith is covered in our press, the way that business is covered in our press. I mean, I don't know what you do about it, because I think we're in danger of blowing the one chance in our lifetime to do something about it. So I fear that nothing is going to be done.
Okay, next round, please. Who'd like to go first? Gentleman there at the back. Very quick off the mark.
Hello. Thank you for your openness and discussing things so openly, Delia. I'm going to ask you, you spoke very favourably about Scripture and how it's influenced you. But is there any Scripture that you reject? I mean, for example, the Adam and Eve story and the idea that human life started 5,000 years ago, according to, Genesis?
Wait.
Do you accept every word in Scripture?
She's raring to go, but let's take another one. Who'd like to go next? Here, please.
My name is Michael Barry. At a previous Westminster Faith debate, Baroness Williams spoke about her belief in a loss of moral compass at every strata of British society. I was wondering, this is for both of you, do you agree? And if you do, what do you mean by it?
Let's take those two, because they're both quite big questions. Delia, do you want to go first?
I don't think I'm in a position really to make a judgment on it. It's a very tricky one for me. I don't think there is really.
What, a loss of moral compass?
In a way, I just believe in the goodness of people, and I don't know how you define it really. How do you define, what morality is? It's an area like. I just believe that I think goodness will always win through. And I think we get a lot of media and information about things that are not moral, but we get not enough about all the wonderful things that go on, and all the beauty and the creative combining of people. And I just feel I have faith that we will always move forward. We will always move on in the right direction.
I mean, I think that, sorry to bang on about the media again, I think the question does come partly from a culture of negativity that we live in, that we're surrounded by the whole time. 1974, the positive to negative ratio in the British media was 3-1. 2003, it was 1-18. Now, that is not just the national newspapers, it's not just the Daily Mail, evil. It's a cultural shift. That's why I was interested in Delia saying, I'd love to know what these stories were. She turns on the radio and ping, there was something wonderful happening. It's very rare.
It's all happening. It's all bubbling along.
But the point about then, does that mean? So I think you've got to be careful distinguishing between a culture of negativity, to which we're all partly responsible because we all consume this stuff, and I don't think we challenge it nearly enough. And then saying, and does that mean that therefore the people who are in positions of leadership and positions where change can be made, whether there has been a loss of basic morality? I'm not sure there has. I think there are still an awful lot of good people doing an awful lot of good things. I just don't think they get as big a voice as they used to.
I think also
Shirley Williams felt it very surprisingly strongly, and she was talking, wasn't she, about leadership in society? She was talking about banking, she was talking about politics, she was talking about police, she was talking.
Okay.
She felt
something
had gone wrong.
I think there's been bad in all of these organisations right down to the beginning of time.
I do.
But I think we only really hear about the bad now. I mean, for example, you take something like Parliament, MPs' expenses. I mean, can anybody name an MP who didn't fiddle their expenses? There were loads and loads and loads and loads.
You did. Charles
Yes,
did.
I know you can name Dennis Skinner, Charles, I know. But
I didn't name myself.
Yes, I know. But my point is, we all know about the moat and the mortgage fiddles and the rest of it. It was done by a minority of MPs, some of whom have gone to jail. Most MPs do a good job. I think the banks is an interesting one. I think the loss of, and I think actually football's interesting as well. I mean, I think Delia and I won't be too far apart. I actually feel there is a kind of immoral streak to the way that modern British football has developed.
Money.
Yeah, totally, all about money. And yet there are very, very good people, including at the top level of football. So compass and leadership, I don't know. I think most people have still got a pretty good moral compass.
Delia, why don't you just talk for a couple of minutes on your approach to football? You've talked to me about it a lot and completely endorses what Alastair said. So could you just describe a little bit about what you feel about the way football's run in Britain?
Well, I just think it's very sad that that money took over, and really the creation of the Premier League really has been its downfall, because certain sort of canny chairmen saw that the Sky money was coming over the hill and thought, well, let's make a special league and take all the money. And the rest of football is scrabbling about, trying to, make ends meet. I've been there, I've struggled trying to make ends meet. And there is all this money washing about. And the money that's all washing about in this one league is going out to the rest of the world to bring in foreign players. And our players, you know, in the lower leagues haven't got a chance. So all the money's not staying in football here, it's going around the world to pray for the best footballers in the world. And it's ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, Norwich, you know, last year when we played Liverpool, they just bought somebody, I don't know. But, you know, the whole squad of Norwich was about half that guy's wages. You know, it's just like, and there you are trying to compete, and it's not really competing, and you've got this sort of top six, and they're never going to change because it's all about money. So I do think that's wrong, and I think it has incredible implications for society here, because I've noticed that football, I always call it the safe drug. I've noticed young guys going to football, letting off steam, is better than them out on the streets doing knife crimes and taking drugs. And I think all governments have missed a trick here by not sorting football out and not threatening to regulate it if it doesn't sort itself out, because the average age of the football attendee now is 47 or something, and you can see where it's going. It's going. It'll only be on television. Okay. So it is a problem.
We don't do football too much.
Okay.
There was the, do you reject any part of Scripture question?
Yes, I don't reject it, but I don't read Scripture as being every line is the truth. There are stories, there are myths, but I don't believe the world was created in 7 days. I'm a total believer in evolution. But if I read the first chapter of Genesis, it moves me because it's saying something, it's symbolizing something very profound. You know, whenever I get to that line that says male and female, he made them, it always kind of catches something in me, and I think how beautiful it is. But I obviously don't believe every word, and I think you have to look at it collectively, but I think there are very profound books in the Bible and very profound things there, particularly Paul's letters and John's Gospel, in a good translation that's modern.
One final round. Who'd like to go? James there. And there are two at the front, please. Here.
Yeah, I'm James Kidner from Coexist. We're an educational foundation. It's a question really for Delia, but let me first of all say thank you, because it's been a fascinating discussion, and it's been rewarding because it hasn't degenerated, as these things often do, particularly when they're styled as debates, into a sort of tisn't. Alastair on the one hand saying God can't possibly be, and Delia on the other hand, in a sense, defending, or vice versa. I'm reminded of a science discussion that I went to recently, where it was all about the electron, which is supposedly a sort of simple little thing that we can remember from our science classes, which whizzes around the atom. And the scientist leading this lecture was explaining that electrons are difficult to understand because they both are and are not at any one time, and that is something that's sort of beyond my comprehension, certainly. Can I ask Delia, do you think that God in his infinite wisdom can both be and not be? Because if that's a possibility, then you stop this binary distinction on which these debates so often founder, and you enable a discussion that becomes a continuum which is richer. But it sort of depends on accepting that there is the possibility of both being and not being. How does that feel for you?
James, it sounds like something that Rowan Williams would say. We've got two questions at the front, please. One here.
Hi, Tilly McEwen. As a student, A-level student studying religious studies, we've looked in great depth at the problem of evil. And you said that you think God is like a father, but a loving father wouldn't let two of his children eat and the other three go hungry, especially during your times of reflection. How do you deal with that?
Mm-hmm. And there was another one just behind you, please. Can you pass the mic back? Thanks.
Hi, I'm Ben Collier. I'm also doing A-levels. My question's for Alastair. Earlier on you mentioned that you're a pro-faith atheist. I was wondering why that is. In what way do you think the good things associated with religion outweigh the bad things?
Thank you. Who's going to go? Which one? Alice, why don't you go first?
Okay. Why am I pro-faith? Because I I think life is about believing. It's about believing and then doing things with your beliefs. Now, Charles and I have both in different ways done that through politics and writing and whatever, and some of the campaigns that we're involved in now. That's about things that we believe in and then using whatever skills and talents and networks we have to go and try to make that change happen. And I really, I don't want to make this sound as I'm coming from a negative perspective. I don't disrespect. I have huge respect for people who have faith, because I think that gives, when it gives their, and I've got members of my family, I've got close friends who've got really, really strong faith, and I like what it does for them. Now, I do think, I was slightly playing devil's advocate with Delia, but I worry when I see the potential for the whole of the Middle East going up, a lot of it driven by people's interpretation and willful misinterpretation of religious faith, either their own or somebody else's, even though there's been huge progress, brackets thanks to the Labour government, close brackets, in Northern Ireland. You've still got a situation just the other day where a woman's had to move out of her house because she voted in a democratic debate to remove a flag from, now people will get up there, and actually when you get down to hear the argument, I'm afraid God comes up quite a lot, and it's their version. And so that's the bad side, that's the negative for me. But I think actually a lot of the people who have a faith and how they pursue that faith, I think it's a force for good. It's just that I don't have it.
Delia.
Which, this young lady?
Yes.
About evil.
Yes.
And, there was somebody who had done a study of it on the radio on the Andrew Marr show, and he wrote a book called 0 Degrees of Empathy, which was about evil. And the debate was really, really interesting, and it sort of got me thinking about it quite a lot. And I do think that I do see the end point of the human race being universal unity and love. But I think we're on a journey towards that, and I think we're not there yet, and we have quite a long way to go. But I do think it's there, and I think we will get there. But if we go back to the father and the children, you can't control your children. You can't lock them up in a room and make them do the right things. You have to let them be free and find their own way. The human race is finding its own way. There is, I believe, more empathy in the world than there was, and we're moving towards a time when we will share our resources, and there won't be famines. But we need to do this together collectively, and we need to recognize the power that we have collectively, the power of our conscience and our intellectual abilities to understand. Why can't we understand, that to blow up the Twin Towers is wrong? We have to be able to find our way, feel our way. We're groping all the time. We're finding our way, we're feeling our way, but we will get there, and it will happen. And I've just seen a lovely, Alastair said, well, how do you see these things every day in life? Well, we've all just seen a really wonderful, fantastic example of what it is, I'm trying to say, during the Olympic Games. And what we saw was people coming together, people sharing, and I heard another thing on the radio where a woman was saying, well, I got on the tube, she said, and everybody was sort of friendly. And she said, I just felt, God, I need to find someone who needs help because I want to go and help someone. It's there. It's right there. And she said, I suddenly had a glimpse of what life could be like. And that is what life could be like. And the other thing I will say about the Olympics, because I was so deeply, deeply moved by it, is if you think of union of the population of the world, the union of the population of the world, I just was there, so beautifully illustrated. I mean, in religious terms, you talk about love being fire. The fire of love is what we talk about all the time, and we talk about it like somebody's got a warm heart, you know, and this image of warmth and fire. And so you saw all these countries of the world coming along with a little thing of oil, and I spent the whole evening wondering what it was, you know. And then every country puts their little thing of oil down in a circle, and then somebody comes and lights each one, and each one becomes a fire. And then they all go up, and they become one in one big fire. Now, I think that was one of the most moving things I've ever seen, and I think this is the future, and this is what we're working towards.
Well, I must say, I think that's a very inspirational note for us to end the discussion. But I was just going to say, James asked the question about can you have God and not God at the same time? Can God be an electron in his metaphor?
Not for me, I'm sorry, James.
So
not for me, James, no.
Yeah, he can.
Okay. So we conclude on that note. Can I, just to say, to many of you will have been to our previous events, we had 7 Westminster faith debates earlier in the year about the relationship between religion and the public sphere. Just to tell you that we have another group of debates taking place at the beginning of next year on religion and the private sphere. And in between, we've had these 3 Westminster faith interviews, which have been designed to try and bring out some of the ways in which faith and religion express themselves through the life of significant individuals in our society. I'm sure you'll agree that, Delia, you've been absolutely wonderful and clear in what you've been saying, and I really appreciate it very much indeed. And Alastair, you've been uncharacteristically polite in the way that you put the questions to Delia over this time. That was a joke, by the way. In fact, he's one of the most polite people I've ever come across most of the time. But we've, joking aside, we've been really, really honoured by both of you this evening. It's been absolutely tremendous. And on behalf of all of us, I'd like to express our thanks to you for coming this evening and sharing your thoughts with us in the way that you have. Thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.